Geek Therapy Radio.
See what microphone I'm recording into. Is it recording through the laptop? It is. Let's change that.
Alright, this should be better. This should be recording through my RCA 77DX. And I apologize right off the bat if my brain sounds a little scrambled right now, because it is 2:30 in the morning as of recording this podcast. Because it's the only time during the day that I really have to do work uninterrupted. And it's so late because I just finished up a video for the museum, which I will link in this podcast description. If you haven't subscribed already to the Houston Museum of Natural Science YouTube channel, that's where I'm doing most of my video work now. So if you're subscribed to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube, the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, and wondering why I don't upload a lot of content on there at the moment, it's because I'm figuring out the balance of uploading what I'm required to do for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and then what I have time left over to do for Geek Therapy Radio. And there are a few projects in the hopper for Geek Therapy Radio. I'm doing an in-depth review of this microphone that you're listening to right now. I've got an unboxing of my laptop, which, spoiler alert, I will talk about later in this podcast. I've got a few cool things that will go up to the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, but if you want to see what I'm doing more often than that, then subscribe to the Houston Museum of Natural Science YouTube channel, and I will include a link below to the video I just finished. So, as many of you know, I have a son, my firstborn son, Riker. He is 7 or 8 months? What is it now? It's late. I'm sorry if my wife's listening. I'm just losing track. And he's at that point where he is sleeping well through the night. So we put him to bed around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and he sleeps all the way, usually until about 6 or 7 a.m. So that means that any work that I wasn't able to get done during the day, which is a lot, I can do after he goes to bed. And I just had this project, and I wanted to get it done, had to get it done. I promised I would have it done by Thursday, and that's what I did. I know I have fathers that listen to this, and you know that you go through that stage of raising a child where you just can't get any work done. And I feel lucky that I get to work from home and be around my son all the time. I would not trade it for the world. But I think a lot of fathers, especially kind of in olden days, it was expected that, the wife just stays home and takes care of the baby or babies while the husband goes out and earns the money and works from 9 to 5. Okay, well, that's the olden days. Now, and especially working from home, you, with a 7 or 8 month old, you only have maybe a handful of minutes at a time. You might have, it seems like you have like 5 minutes, if that, at a time to focus on doing productive work before the baby needs something. And I'm more than happy to jump up and help out and take care of my son. But the reality is that you just don't get much work done. If you are even 2 parents at a time, tag teaming, taking care of an infant, and you're both working from home, not a whole lot of work gets done during the day. And you might be asking yourself, well, what about when he naps? Well, yes, when he naps, we can get some work done, but Riker currently only naps for about, on average, 1 sleep cycle, so about 35 to 37 minutes. He goes into REM sleep like once, and once he comes out of REM, that first cycle of REM sleep, he has trouble getting back to sleep. So 2, maybe 3 times a day, we have a 35-minute window to try to do some real work. But yeah, that's why tonight, for big projects like this, I told my wife the other day, I was like, we're going to have to consider burning the midnight oil at this point. We're going to have to consider that we can't dig into any real work until he goes to bed. So that's what I did tonight. I wrote a script during the day in the, few minutes here and there that I was able to sit down and hash out a script. Wrote the script. After he went to bed, I set up the teleprompter and the camera and everything and the green screen. I read the script, and then I spent the last few hours editing the video together and rendering it out. And that's just the way it is right now. And I really don't want this to sound like I'm complaining. It's just the reality of raising a child right now, and I would not change any of it for the world because I'm around to see all of his firsts. It's amazing, and I'm filled with love. And I don't mean that we get no work done, that my wife and I get absolutely zero work done during the day. No, it's kind of, I know that I can respond to emails and talk to the team and be a part of our work group during the day, and I can do the Zoom calls and things like that. But as far as like making content, writing scripts and recording takes and doing this radio show for that matter, but like recording videos, editing videos, it's almost impossible. And all that kind of meat and potato stuff has to be done after baby boy goes to sleep. So yeah, during the day I'm answering the phone, I'm answering the text, I'm answering the emails, I'm doing all the things, but I can't actually like edit video until he goes to bed. So that's a good segue into this next segment of the podcast. And by the way, this is just a podcast. I do not have the energy right now to record a radio show. So I'm just recording the podcast old school style for y'all. Just a single podcast, no breaks. We're just going straight through. Well, no breaks. I say no breaks. iHeart adds a break randomly, at least one or two. I think there's like one at the beginning, and then they add one in the middle somewhere, and then there's one at the end. I apologize for that. I have zero control over that. But yeah, this is just going to be a one-off podcast with no commercial breaks. And I'm going to try to keep my train of thought going here. I want to start. Yes, I did get a new laptop, and that's kind of going to be the meat and potatoes of this podcast. But I want to start with the newest addition to the audio signal chain. So many of you know I've been using this RCA 77DX microphone here, and I hope it sounds a bit better as far as noise is concerned, because a week or two ago I finally received, I think it was last week. Yeah, last week I finally received my inline signal booster, gain booster, which really helps ribbon microphones, because ribbon microphones have such low output, especially vintage ribbon microphones like this RCA 77DX. I ordered the SE Electronics DM1 Dynamite one-channel active inline preamp for dynamic and passive ribbon microphones. I'm reading the description off of Amazon. That's why I ordered it. So it boosts the gain through the cable by it's like 25 to 28 decibels before it actually hits the mic preamp. And it's supposed to be clean gain, and hopefully it is clean gain, and you'll know it's clean gain by I'm doing the same EQ settings. And if you're not hearing a bunch of hiss in the high end and static and noise, that means that this was a good improvement to the signal path, because now instead of the gain knob on my Tascam preamp interface being at 95%, now it's at just over 50%. Still nice and hot, but still a dramatic reduction in gain from the actual mic preamp, and that should help clean up the audio quite a bit. But we shall see if there's still any kind of hiss or noise, static going on in the high end, in the high frequencies. It's just going to be the inherent noise of the microphone, or the inherent noise still of my interface, or the inline preamp. But it should be dramatically reduced. Should be, and hopefully it is. Let me know if you noticed any sort of decrease in overall noise in the microphone. I think the tone, and it's all subjective, I think the tone that I'm getting out of it with my EQ settings and all that is good, but I was noticing some hiss on the high end when I had that preamp gain cranked all the way to 95% before I had the inline gain booster. So that's the update on the audio signal path here at Geek Therapy Radio. But the biggest update that I have, if you remember the last episode, the cliffhangers, I was deciding and mulling over what laptop I wanted to get. I replaced my workhorse laptop every 3 to 5 years. So I was in that kind of magical land of laptop shocking. Yeah, it is shocking. Of laptop shopping. And I know a lot of fellow geeks listen to this show, and a lot of fellow geeks do a lot of computer work. And when it comes laptop shopping time, it's a very exciting time. It's kind of like shopping for a car. Because it's a big purchase, you want to make sure that you're very well researched, and then you're doing all the research and looking through all the eye candy and Googling all sorts of things and reading all sorts of juicy specs all over the place, and what's different and what's offered by different companies and manufacturers, and what's even available right now in 2021. It's about what is just freaking available without getting price gouged, with what you're able to do and pay MSRP, and what's the best out there at the MSRP, what's the best out there that is potentially available. And I had boiled it down as of last broadcast. I had boiled it down. Maybe I didn't mention this directly on the air, but I had boiled it down to two choices. It was what was it? I believe it was the Ace. Yeah, it was both Asus. I say Asus. They were both Asus. It was the Asus. No. You know what? Gosh. I gotta look it up. I gotta look it up because I want to be correct on this. Yeah, Asus. The G14. I was debating between going for a 17-inch laptop, the Asus G14 with the RTX 3070, and Ryzen 9 5900HX, 8-core 16-thread processor. So I was debating between going for that big screen laptop, and then the second choice was the Asus Zephyrus G14, which is a very highly rated, popular laptop. So was the G17, and the G17 was I've got the website open right, B&H right here, $1,800, but it is absolutely impossible to get. You can go cruise over to Amazon and you can pay $500-$600 more from a scalper trying to sell it at a premium. But the idea, there was no real waiting for a restocking from any supplier to be able to buy it at $1,800. And $1,800 is nothing to sneeze at. It's a lot of freaking money. But it's a full power, 135 watt RTX 3070, 8 gigabyte RTX 3070, full wattage. It's a good laptop, very popular laptop. That's why it's sold out. That's why, well, it's not why it's sold out. It's really sold out because of supply issues. If it was a popular laptop, Asus could do it. They would just keep supplying the laptop and keep selling it and keep making the money. But they can't physically produce the laptop due to production issues. And the next theoretical, I forget exactly where I read this, so don't quote me exactly on this. It might have been in a Twitter thread or a Reddit thread or somewhere in the interwebs. But they were suspecting that Asus wouldn't put out a new supply of G17s, Strix G17s, until like September or November. So like fall of this year, possibly late fall of this year. And I'm just like, I am not waiting that long for something that may or may not happen. So the more I thought about it, the more reviews I watched and read, the Zephyrus G14 looked to be a winner. It looked to be just powerhouse specs within its chassis, a 14-inch chassis. So it's rocking the 5900. This is the 2021 model of Zephyrus G14. It is the 5900 HS, 8-core, 16-thread, up to 4.6 gigahertz. It comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM. 8 of that is soldered on. And the 60 watt version up to like 85 watts, it can burst up to 80 or 85 watts version of the RTX 3060, the 6 gigabyte version of it, so the normal version of it. And it was $1,500 from Best Buy. And the thing is, I wound up getting that laptop. That is what I am recording into right now. And the thing is that I live in Houston, Texas. For those of you who don't know, Houston is a gigantic city, one of the biggest cities in the world. It's like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, and I think Chicago and Houston kind of like trade with each other as far as population. Houston might have more population than Chicago now. But so Houston is either the third or fourth largest city in the United States. And the only reason I'm telling you that is Houston was resupplied with Zephyrus G14s. And there were about, according to Best Buy, because Best Buy was the only outlet that carries them, there were about 3 in this entire city. According to the website, 3 left, act soon. And then you go to other locations, other Best Buy locations around Houston, be like sold out, sold out, sold out, sold out. So the one nearest, not nearest to my house, but nearest, to actually make the drive out there was, I think it was in Pearland. So I drove out there. It was about 20 minutes away. Not too bad. But I purchased it the night before. They had 3 left. I purchased it online, which was kind of rigmarole to do that. And it was going to be waiting for me inside Best Buy. I got the confirmation email in the morning, maybe 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning. Somebody at Best Buy staff had fetched it. It actually existed, and I went and I picked it up. And I felt very thankful that I was able to get a Zephyrus G14 in this current laptop climate. That I was able to get it for MSRP. That I didn't buy it at a gouged price, because I wasn't gonna do that. So I have the Zephyrus G14, and those of you who follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you saw my kind of elusive post where I posted the box, the Asus box, but you didn't know whether it was a G14, 15, you didn't know what it is. I purposefully kind of took that picture so you didn't have any kind of scale to scale the size of the box. It was just up against like a blank wall and carpet, so there's no real way to tell. But yeah, it's the Zephyrus G14, 144 hertz, 14-inch screen, which is gorgeous. Like I said, the RTX 3060 60-watt version, so I guess it's called a Max Q version, and the Ryzen 9 5900 HS. I'm going to tell you my overall impressions of it so far. I've had it for not even a week. I got it on Friday, and then I took my second Moderna COVID shot on Saturday, and Sunday, my butt was knocked out. That second shot knocked me out for about 24 hours. Not to get too sidetracked, but several hours after I got the shot at 1:05 p.m. Come 3 a.m. the next morning, I had like bone shaking shivers. I had a fever, but I was freezing, and my teeth were chattering. It was freaking horrible. And the next day, it felt like I got hit in the right arm. That's where I got my shot, with a Louisville Slugger baseball bat, and then tossed over the Niagara Falls in a potato sack. That's how it felt. I felt so bad. But yeah, so I got the laptop on Friday, got the shot on Saturday. Sunday was a wash. It was one of the very few times in my entire career that, I married my boss at church. And I was like, nope, can't come in to run the sound and do all the things. And I feel like I'm letting everyone down, and I'm so sorry. But I was like, I can barely move. This sucks. So anyway, Sunday was a wash. I didn't tinker with the laptop. Monday, Tuesday, and today are the days that I've been able to kind of really put it through its paces. And I just edited that video for the museum. That's linked below in the podcast description. I just finished that with this laptop, and it was amazing. I mean, this is the best laptop I've ever owned, and that's no surprise to say. It's the most powerful laptop I've ever owned. It's the quickest, fastest in every conceivable way, 8 cores and 16 threads. Here's the thing about that. So let me just tell you real quick. My 5-minute video rendered out in like a minute and 12 seconds, something like that. It was rendering out at over 100 frames per second on average, and it was a 29.97 frame project with a bunch of fusion happening going on. I had a green screen. I was replacing the background, doing a bunch of stuff. Not overly complicated, but still, there's a lot of stuff going on. And for those of you who use DaVinci Resolve, Fusion is very highly dependent on the graphics card and the processor itself. DaVinci Resolve really extracts the most out of processor and your GPU. It's a very efficient video editor. I'm very happy that Asaf, thank you for turning me on to DaVinci Resolve and convincing me to use it. And others have mentioned that I should switch to DaVinci Resolve too. I was using Vegas Pro, whatever. But no, editing on there was buttery smooth. I did convert my clips to what do you call it? Optimized media for editing purposes. So that was DNxHR. Is that right? DNxHR. That's the codec. HQX, not 444, but HQX. So very high quality. I could have done 444 broad production quality or delivery quality and just edited kind of just uncompressed like that. Not actually uncompressed, but you get what I'm saying. It handled it with ease, with absolute ease. It was such a nice experience editing in this 1080p. I should have mentioned that 1080p video on this laptop, and then the render time took 1/5 of the actual project time. That's amazing. 8 cores, 16 threads, and here's where it just boggles my mind. This is technically it's a 35 watt chip in here. The 5900HS is the TDP is set to 35 watts, but it can throttle all the way up to brief bursts of it says 85 watts. I haven't seen anything over. It was like 78 watts. I've seen it peak up to 78 watts, which is not bad for a 35 watt TDP to crank all the way up to 78 watts easily. But even sitting there cruising along at 38 watts, all cores are running at 4 gigahertz. 4 freaking gigahertz at 35 watts, full load, artificial stress tests, and real stress tests on the CPU. It is cruising at 4 gigahertz under full load. That is amazing. My last laptop from 2016, understandably, and I don't blame it for this, all core was, and there's only 4 cores. It's the i7-6700HQ from Intel. It would throttle at 3.1 gigahertz. Base clock was like 2.2 or something like that, so it wasn't going to base clock. It was still in turbo mode technically, but the max turbo speed on single core was 3.5 gigahertz. All core was 3.1 gigahertz. So it's amazing on this new laptop, the G14, Zephyrus G14, Asus Zephyrus G14, that full bore, full load, I'm at 4 gigahertz. Sometimes it goes like to 4.1 gigahertz all core. It's craziness. 16 threads. Absolute craziness. I mean, that's like my 3900X that I have in my big rig with the RTX 3090. That 3900X is, couple previous generation of Ryzen 9 desktop, and I have it overclocked all core at 4.2 gigahertz, and that is sucking down like 105 watts TDP or whatever it is to crank it at 4.2 gigahertz. This laptop is sipping 36 watts, 36, 37, 38 watts, full core cranked at 4 gigahertz, just 200 megahertz below. It is nuts how efficient Zen 3 is. Ryzen is just, and AMD is just crushing Intel. And I know 11th gen has come out, but like, man, 5900HS in this 14-inch chassis just screams. In the 3060, even at 60 watts, I'm telling you, if you are worried, if you can get your hands on a G14 and you're shopping for a new laptop and you had your eyes on the G14, Yeah, and you're worried, oh, well, it's a max Q 3060 in there. It's not the full wattage 3060. I think full wattage for a 3060 laptop is like 115 watts. But yeah, no, on the G14, it's throttled down to 60, and I think it can jump up to 80 or 85 watts. It doesn't matter. Any freaking game I throw at this flies. Microsoft Flight Simulator, absolute maximum ultra settings, 1080p, cruising along just fine, well over 30 frames per second. And I know that sounds, for the uninitiated in flight sims, 30 frames a second, that's pleb. You should be running at 144 or like 300 hertz. Nah, not Flight Simulator 2020. I'm telling you, if you are over 20 frames per second in Flight Simulator 2020, you are doing just fine, bud. You are doing just fine. Maximum frames that I can see under absolute heavy load at like LAX or some other complicated airport is around it's like 45 frames per second. Maybe it's like 53 frames per second. Like, you are not getting 60 at all due to numerous reasons and optimizations or unoptimizations with Flight Simulator, which we won't get into right here. But you're not seeing 60 in complicated scenery in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, even with an RTX 3090 with 24 gigs of VRAM in a Ryzen 9 3900X overclocked to 4.2 gigahertz across all 12 cores and 24 threads. You are not seeing 60 frames per second in complex scenery in Flight Simulator 2020. You're just not. So the fact that on this G14 with the RTX 3060 and the Ryzen 9 5900HS that I'm getting over 30 frames per second maximum absolute cranked ultra settings 1080p is amazing. Just absolutely astonishing, flabbergasted. My jaw is I have zero buyer's remorse getting this laptop. It was the right choice. The speakers in it, I wouldn't say I do have my MacBook Pro 13 M1 back there. I wouldn't say that the speakers in the G14 are as good as a MacBook Pro speakers, but they are exquisite for laptop. They have actual bass, good mid-range, good highs. I wasn't even expecting the speakers in this to be that good, but I could happily mix a podcast and edit video through these speakers and enjoy music through them. They sound really good. They have the two up top tweeters front firing at your face. So you get, and the other like subwoofers and stuff are aimed down at the desk, but it doesn't matter. The tweeters are aimed at your ears. It makes it sound much more full and directed towards your ears. The sound out of this laptop is amazing. I wasn't expecting that, but it is amazing. There are a few little drawbacks, I wouldn't call it, and some of this is just really nitpicking. The backlighting, I know the first generation of G14, the backlighting of the keys, the keyboard backlighting, let me be specific here, the screen's fine. The keyboard backlighting, the white LEDs behind the keyboard were uneven in the first generation of the G14, and they have improved the overall uniformity of the white backlights of the keyboard, but this laptop is white. At least the version that you can really only get from Best Buy is white. The keyboard deck is white. In the white backlight under the white keys during the daytime under any sort of daylight is terrible. Under any sort of direct lighting, the white backlight under white keys is atrocious. You cannot see the keys. You have to, you're going to have to type from feel. Most people do type from feel. But if you need to look down at the keyboard for any reason, like if you want to punch a function key and you haven't memorized where the function keys and what they do for like screen brightness and stuff like that, the white backlight is terrible. It is the single most egregious part of this laptop. It's not a deal breaker. Just keep the backlight off until nighttime, until you actually need the backlight. Just memorize where the backlight function key is, and it is function F2 and F3. F2 for decreasing brightness, F3 for increasing brightness. Memorize where those are, and you'll be all set. But actually, like keeping the backlight on during the daylight, it makes your whole keyboard camouflaged into the deck. You can't see it. It's terrible. And you would have thought that Asus which otherwise is a good company, would have fixed that in this model, which is otherwise one of the best laptops you can buy right now, period. They would have fixed that in this new generation of G14, but they didn't, and it sucks, and it's terrible, and every review you hear, read, or see, or watch is going to say that same thing. The keyboard backlight sucks on the G14. 100% true. That's the biggest downside for the laptop, but it's not a huge downside. It's not a deal breaker at all. The other kind of negative, I would say, depending on who you are, is that the RAM, that 8 gigabytes of it is soldered on. It's 3200 megahertz. That's good. That's a good speed for laptop RAM. It, of course, is DDR4. But I don't like this trend in a lot of laptops where they're going only single upgradable stick. I don't like that, especially in these higher end laptops. It should be dual accessibility to both RAM modules, but it's not. 8 gigabytes in this model is soldered on, which means that the max, I think the max listed under the G14 by Asus is technically like, there's like 32 gigs or something like that, maximum RAM configuration, which how are you going to do that with 8 gigs soldered on? It's kind of hard to do. I'm just telling you right now, it handles 40 gigabytes just fine. I got another 32 gigabyte stick of 3200 megahertz RAM, the cheapest off of Amazon, and I plugged it in and it works just fine. I've got 40 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz RAM. And the reason why the soldered on is a downside, other than you can't upgrade it, is that it means that out of the 40 gigabytes of RAM that I have, only up to 16 gigabytes of that is actually running in dual channel. When you go above 16 gigabytes of RAM, the rest of that is running in single channel. That's not a huge deal for content creation. So if you're a video editor or a music creator, it's not a huge deal that you're running single channel above 16 gigabytes. But it does matter in some games. In some games, and even then it can be marginal, and I've heard people mention that, oh, make sure that you really want as much dual channel RAM as possible because it's an AMD processor. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's really only or mostly due to the integrated graphics of the AMD processor, since it's sharing the VRAM, and the same could be said for Intel graphics too. It's sharing the VRAM there as well, and yeah, dual channel memory in that configuration is going to be important, much more important. But I'm telling you, I've been using this laptop, 16 gigs of dual channel, and then you have I can't do math, 24 more above that in single channel. It has not been a detriment. I like I just mentioned, in editing in DaVinci Resolve, and it was sucking up more than 20 gigs of RAM, so I was going over. Some of the RAM I was using in my editing session was technically single channel. Fine. It was fine, and it rendered out at over 100 frames per second. Fine. It was perfect. It was great. So don't be scared of that. It's a downside that it's 8 gigs is soldered on and you only have access to one SODIMM slot, but it's not a deal breaker. The next kind of downside, it's not a deal breaker, again, because I just told you how good video editing was. I really prefer, in a lot of video editors, I know you're listening, you prefer and you used to need, and it's not so much the same right now with NVMe's, multiple hard drives, multiple solid state drives. Even my old 14-inch MSI over here sitting next to me had a 2.5-inch bay and the NVMe slot, so I could have an NVMe hard drive and a SATA SSD, but I would have 2 solid-state drives, which is important for video editing because you need a scratch disk at least. Video editing, you want 2, 3, or even 4 different solid-state drives going. But honestly, with NVMe, I was curious about this. I was curious because the NVMe drive in here, it's 1 terabyte. It's not the fastest in the entire world, but I wanted to edit a video project just off of the NVMe, where I don't have external SSDs hooked up as cache disks or scratch disks or for proxy media and all that kind of stuff. I wanted all of it running off of just the one NVMe drive, and it did beautifully. Would I prefer that there still were 2 NVMe slots in here? Because I know for sure could fit it, even if one slot wasn't as long as the other, even if one slot was like 2220 or 2260 rather than 2280, or whatever variable thereof. I would have still preferred to have 2, because I would have definitely set up the secondary SSD in here as a scratch disk, as a cache disk. So you can't do that with this one. You only have 1 NVMe slot in this G14, which means you are relegated to dongle land if you want to have more solid-state storage over Type-C, high-speed solid-state storage. And you can absolutely do that, and it absolutely works just fine. But that means, as of recording right now, the biggest solid-state drive that you can put in here, the max amount of storage that you can have baked into the motherboard, is up to 8 terabytes of NVMe storage. If you want to spend $1,000, if not more, on a single stick of 8 terabyte NVMe drive, I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to do that. As of recording right now, the lowest price on an 8 terabyte stick, I think, is Inland, which is a Micro Center brand, if I'm not mistaken, or Micro Center gets a lot of Inland RAMs, just parts, period. 8 terabytes was $1,000. Now, the next step down is 4 terabytes. The cheapest 4 terabyte drive I saw, also Inland, was $480, which isn't too terribly, isn't bad. You can get 2 terabyte drives, which is what I'm probably going to do a little bit down the road, for about $205. And we're talking NVMe, and this is a PCI Express Gen 3, so it's not Gen 4, but you're still getting 3000 write and 3500 read, which is plenty. Believe me, it's plenty. I have 2 NVMe M.2 drives in my Beast rig with the 3090 and the 3900X. I have 2 1 terabyte Samsung Evo 980s or whatever, which write up to like 7,000 read and write, 7,000 megabytes read and write, 7 gigs read and write. It's freaking crazy, absolutely bonkers crazy how fast those drives are. And I use one of them as a scratch drive and one of them as the operating system drive. It is the rig. My main editing rig is just about the fastest, most state-of-the-art you can possibly get, other than slapping a 5950X in there. It's got a 3900X, 12 core, not the 5950X, 16 cores, 32 threads. Maybe eventually I'll do that. We're talking prosumer, high-end desktop here, so we're not talking Threadripper. It's not a 128 core Threadripper in there. But I'm pretty much maxed out. I would say the bottleneck in my system right now is, it sounds weird to say this, is the 3900X. It's probably the bottleneck in that system right now when it's paired up to that 3090, and it's being fed information by, or the RAM's being fed information by 2 Gen 4 7000 read and write M.2 SSDs. So many acronyms I'm throwing out on my brain that is just frazzled right now. It is 3:05 in the morning and I'm still recording this podcast. Anyways, back to the G14. I know there were other nitpicks that I had about it. This is not a nitpick. The battery life is amazing. The battery life is amazing. Every time I look at the battery, it says 10 hours estimated. I fully believe it because it's barely chewing down any of the percentages of the battery. So, and I know that 8 to 10 hours is about average for this G14, if not a little bit more, which is amazing for a laptop like this. A powerhouse laptop like this. You put it in a silent mode and you're getting around 10 hours just to type documents and surf the web, watch videos and things. Awesome. That is awesome. Downsides, though. The lid, I wish it had a little lip or a little kind of protrusion where you could get your thumbnail under or your thumb under to open. The lid closes magnetically, and it's very flush. The design is amazing, but you sometimes you have to like get 2 hands to kind of awkwardly kind of pry it the lid away from the chassis. It's kind of weird. So I kind of wish there was a little protrusion or some sort of indent to make opening the lid a little harder, but it'll make the opening a little easier, but that's just nitpicking. It's AMD Ryzen, so of course it doesn't have Thunderbolt 3 or 4 for that matter. Very rarely does an AMD chipset support Thunderbolt, but the Type-C is great. It works well with my dongle. It outputs to my secondary screen through the HDMI of my dongle. I have a 100 watt Type-C charger plugged into here. Performance is good on the Type-C charger. I'll tell you that right now. So if you plug it in, it can only the left side. I'll say that the Type-C that on the same side of the barrel plug, that's the one that accepts the power delivery. And it's only up to 100 watts on the 2021 model. I think the 2020 model was up to 65 watts, but the 2021 model is definitely 100 watt. And it's the Type-C on the same side as the barrel plug. When you are plugged in Type-C to 100 watts, the only modes that you're allowed to operate in are silent and turbo, which is fine. Both of those provide excellent performance, but you cannot select performance mode or manual mode, where in manual mode, you're allowed to overclock the CPU and the GPU. If you're just getting power delivery from Type-C, it disables that manual mode and it disables performance mode, and all you have left over are silent and turbo, which, believe me, are plenty for most things. But that's what you're restricted to over Type-C power delivery on the 2021 G14. And that was not a negative. That it's awesome. One reason I wanted this laptop, and I was kind of leaning towards a smaller laptop, is because I wanted to be able to power it over just the one Type-C cable. I want to plug this Type-C that's going through a dongle with power delivery. I want to plug it in the G14, ready to rock. Then I want to unplug it. I want to plug it into the MacBook Pro, and that's ready to rock, getting all the power and everything it needs through the dongle. I just basically swap computers, and I'm on a completely different operating system. It's awesome. And then I can unplug the Type-C and put it into my beast mode rig. There's no power delivery point to that, but my audio interface and a whole bunch of other stuff is going through a hub. So all those three systems, and I wanted my laptop, my Windows laptop, to finally be able to be one that accepts power delivery over Type-C. Negative. There was... I want to say there was something today that stuck out in my head, and I was like, I got to remember to mention this as a negative on the review, but on the podcast review, but it wasn't. I guess it wasn't bad enough to stick out. I think there's still kind of little, maybe software kinks to work out here and there. And I don't know if I can blame G14 on this, and I'm not going to, so I'm not going to mention it because it could not be G14's fault. Software is known to get gummy sometimes, and the only way to reopen the software is to restart the computer, and that happens from time to time. That happens on my Mac. Macs aren't perfect. This whole idea, and I'm not going to get on this big diatribe, but this idea that Macs are perfect and just way more reliable than PCs, that's a bunch of freaking hogwash. It is hogwash. If you use a Mac enough, if you power use, maybe if all you're doing is get on the internet or watching Netflix and cruising Facebook on your Mac, okay, maybe it's more reliable than a PC. But if you're doing actual work, like if you're doing actual video editing or audio editing or using any sort of professional programs and stuff that really pushes the system, you can gum up the Mac, and you have to restart the Mac, even an M1, to kind of open DaVinci Resolve again, for instance. It's a thing. Just because you're on a Mac doesn't mean that it's automatically just the most reliable thing in the world. Nope, it gets gummed up, it gets flummoxed from time to time, just like my Windows PC does. But neither of them gets messed up enough for it to really matter much. I think that's all that I have to say. The trackpad is good. I was really worried that the trackpad in here would be a bad trackpad because it's Windows, but the trackpad's good. I don't want to rely on the trackpad, but if all I have to work with for short bursts, laying in bed or whatever, is the trackpad, it's fine. I'd still pack a slim Bluetooth mouse into my backpack to take with me, but the built-in, the trackpad's good. And the key feel is excellent. The typing experience on this is just exquisite. What else? The 144 hertz screen is amazing. Port selection is really good. On the right side, you have 2 Type A's and 1 Type C. They're all running at 3.2 protocol. On the left, you have the barrel plug. You have HDMI, which is 2.1, whatever the latest and greatest protocol of HDMI is. I think it can output 8K at, I think it can do 8K 30, or if not 8K 60. But it's whatever the latest flavor of HDMI is. And then you have the Type C port on this left side that's also power delivery. And you have the headphone and microphone combo jack. That's kind of a little knock. On a product this powerful, give us a separate headphone and microphone jack. But that's a little nitpick. Man, the Wi-Fi is awesome on it. It's Wi-Fi 6. It's awesome. It's just such a good laptop, and it's hard to find fault with it. Some reviews say, and I'll start wrapping up with this because I'm getting moron tired now. Some reviews knock it for being hot. Oh, be careful, the laptop gets hot. Of course it gets hot. A, it's a laptop. B, it's a small form factor 14-inch laptop. It's gonna get hot. So they'll be like, oh, pointing right. I've said this before. The bottom of the screen, right near the bottom of the screen, it gets blazing. I feel like I can boil water up there. Well, then don't touch that top part. You're not supposed to touch that top part. It's gonna be hot, and they gotta direct the heat somewhere. It's gotta collect somewhere, and they don't want it collecting below the keyboard. The keyboard, I will say, to their credit, for the people who say that this laptop gets hot, the keyboard does get warm. I would not call it uncomfortable, but the keyboard does get warm. It is just it's par for the course with laptops of this form factor. But overall, I'm amazed at how cool it keeps the chips in here. Yes, they will peak up to like 90 over 90C, which is fine. I'm glad. I'm okay to have a laptop that peaks to that high if I'm getting full performance out of the chips. Most of the time, it's chilling. It's literally chilling. I've been recording my podcast the whole time in manual mode, which has the CPU and GPU overclocked. What are my temps here? I'm opening up core temp, cruising at 72C, and the frequency is fluctuating, and cores are going to 4.6 gigahertz. You actually do see the 4.6 on here, going around from single core from time to time. It's cruising around 471C right now. Currently consuming 9 watts, 15 watts, 12 watts, 6 watts, 13 watts, 16 watts, 12 watts, 8 watts. Not much. And it's at 71C, and it's fully baked in. I've been editing on this for hours. It's been on for hours. It is doing very, very well. How long has this podcast been going for? 49 minutes? That's longer than a broadcast would have been. My goodness. Other news? I don't know. I'm tired, y'all. I'm tired. Things are good. Things are good at the Hamburger House. I hope y'all are all well. Why am I saying y'all so much? I say y'all. I'm from Texas. But I hope you all are doing very well. Thank you so much for your emails. Thank you so much for reaching out on Twitter and the Facebook page. Again, make sure that you check out the Houston Museum of Natural Science YouTube page if you want to kind of see what I'm up to more often than the podcast had been. If you want to stay in complete touch with what I'm doing, I'm just saying, go follow what the Houston Museum of Natural Science is doing, especially on YouTube. That's my title, is YouTube channel manager for the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And I basically am just in charge of the quality of content, doing the best I can with what we got to make sure that the quality of content is good and on the uptick, on the upslope. For instance, we were doing a podcast on there called Beyond Bones. We were doing it over Zoom because of COVID times. And one of the changes I implemented was we can't just have a video uploaded straight from Zoom. It can't be like that. Somebody can't come from an MKBHD video to our channel and then see a Zoom chat. It just won't work like that. We at least need to have intro video at the beginning of higher quality so that people are eased into the fact that it's about to switch over to a Zoom chat. And little improvements like that. I went through and I got rid of a whole lot of, just unlisted. It still exists. Just unlisted a bunch of like shaky smartphone stuff that I just like, it doesn't really need to be there. Like if you go compare, our YouTube channel to like the Smithsonian's, like it's not, that's where we need to head. And I'm not denigrating the channel at all, or the museum at all. No, absolutely not. But this is why they hired me, because they were able to, they have people focusing on Facebook and social media and Twitter and stuff like that, growing that, hundreds of thousands of subscribers and followers on the social media. But nobody was really paying attention to growing or the quality of content on YouTube. It was mainly being treated as kind of a depository, or it's not suppository, but kind of a cache of like, oh, we have this video clip, let's just put it up on YouTube. So I was hired to get YouTube, the museum's YouTube, more focused, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And you'll subscribe, you'll see that it is now content of a consistent quality, and it's basically what I did for Geek Therapy Radio and what I do for Geek Therapy Radio, but for the museum, and it's really fun. So go check that out. Houston Museum of Natural Science on YouTube if you want to, stay more in touch with what I'm up to. That's it. I want to talk about the Ford Lightning, all sorts of stuff, but I'm tired. I don't think anyone will blame me for going to sleep, because baby boy's going to be up in like 3 hours, and I'm going to be tired. Thank you so much for listening to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. The most important thing, this, if you listen to the show, the most important thing is to know that you are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love, you are worthy of receiving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. I think one way that we learn all those things is by embracing our geek thing and becoming passionate about it, as passionate as we can. Maybe rekindle an old hobby, find a new hobby. That's where we get that self-confidence, and where we start realizing the truth that we and you are worthy of love. So thank you so much for listening. Take care, and I'll talk to you in the next one.